Hi everybody, Robert Ogilvy, Team and Leadership Coach. So today's question, why is emotional intelligence helpful in teams? So first of all, I guess part of this is premised on why is emotional intelligence helpful at all, right? And it's a lot of things around being aware of yourself and what you're feeling, knowing your patterns, um, uh, choosing yourself or kind of making decisions effectively, which is like part keeping things together and pulling in information, applying consequential thinking well, kind of trying to create win-win, having on-demand willpower when you need it, being resilient, and also stuff around empathizing with others and having good, big, noble goals, hopefully kind of service and long-term legacy goals, which are helping others, but also giving meaning to your life, right? And becoming a wellspring of motivation. Um, so a lot of those are very personal, and a lot of those are also very relational, right? So if you think of teams become the closest use case of these, or teams and families, really, right? And sometimes when I say teams, I guess I'm assuming kind of work teams, but it could be any hobby team, any religious or spiritual team, any kind of team that has a big shared mission. I don't even think it's critical if they have a mission. This is the mission part is me thinking back to my own kind of team building, team performance model stuff. Thinking of you're going to start with the mission and then you're building up this stuff. Maybe this is another good way to kind of digress into those models too, right? So whether you're talking about the classic Tuckman, forming, storming, norming, performing kind of model, or there's lots of other models I would prefer instead. I'm a big fan of the Drexler-Sibbett model with its 7 stages, right? Um, there's a bunch of other ones, Lencioni's 5 behaviors, and other ways to kind of address the sequence you need to do this. If you think of, they'll often have the first or second or somewhere in the early end of things, this point where you need to, they could frame it as develop trust or have good communication, or it's like engage the team, right? Well, that's a lot of EQ stuff, right? Can we set goals together that make sense for us? Can we develop rapport and trust with each other? Can we manage our own kind of stress and ambiguity of the same situation we're in to lean into things and create some win-win situation for us all, right? Can we be resilient to the change, whatever changing circumstances might be around us, and summon energy to make this workable? Can we be aware enough of our own patterns and reactions that we have not only something to contribute, but don't toxify the group? I will say, in teams and organizations, when you're talking about performance, yes, part of this is about trying to bring the best performance long term out of everyone and engage the organization. But in a very specific sense around performance, you're trying to spot and contain, get rid of toxic people as quickly as possible. They have a very bad effect on the organization, very bad. So that's part of recognizing patterns, right? What are these bad emotional patterns, bad behavioral patterns you might be in, right? This is all stuff that's going to come out when you're dealing with your team. What are some other areas, thinking with the different team models? So then I would say in the team model is the mid. Let's go back to the Drexler-Sibbett model, right? The 3rd and 4th stages are about first starting to orient to work, clarifying what might happen and kind of roles, and then the next one is really about committing to work and what specific tasks need to happen and can we commit to doing that, right? Even that starts to relate to emotional intelligence. This is going to start to get more to the technical end of whatever particular work you do, whether it's sales or engineering work or some combination of things, right? But yeah, this stuff is also kind of EQ skills, and then it's around applying consequential thinking. It's also having on-demand willpower, engaging intrinsic motivation, so that it's not just all kind of high-level mission strategy work and emotional kind of team rapport engagement work, but ultimately at some point the rubber hits the road and you guys actually can commit to tasks and clarify tasks and get them done. And even that can become a good cycle because people get that, they get a sense of what's possible, and that itself is motivating, right? Yeah. So even on the high end of teams, it's a lot of emotional intelligence stuff in that more and more they become kind of masters of their technical craft, right? You don't, the expert engineer has been doing that for 15 years, right? You don't need to tell him technically how to be a good engineer, but you might need to sometimes still remind him, our priorities are these things, not those things, or some other stuff as they perhaps are dealing with larger scope of work or some other situation, right? Back to Tuckman's model, right? The third stage, norming. Your role as the leader, as the team manager, whatever it is, becomes the norming piece. Really just means to say that, yeah, again, technically they know their job, they know how to execute and operate, but you do need to be there sometimes in terms of when special conflicts or special situations pop up and they need your help to think through things or navigate. You're never going to be the one doing the technical work, but that is still an ongoing issue with any team, right? A lot of times too, when we think of organizations that are even subject to politics, it's not that you don't have smart people capable of executing, but the notion of who's on board, are we getting the results out that we need, who's working, who's not working. um, yeah, that's kind of part of the emotional intelligence end of the people side of teams, right? um, yeah. What else can I say? You guys have probably heard of maybe of the concept of learning organizations and how learning is also a good tool to get engagement, right? So this is also something that relates to that because that takes motivation. So that's an EQ competency. That's drive is actually one of the success factors. So it's a composite of I think 3 of these 8 EQ competencies, right? In general, even long term, a lot of these are quite useful. I sometimes think of them as, if you think of starting with knowing yourself and going downwards, that they're becoming ever more kind of momentary and awareness oriented, to ever more tactical, to finally kind of big scope stuff. So I feel like some of these will develop in time, right? So there could be people you start off with, and then years later it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm good friends with this coworker, and like we have a very strong bond together, and it's been a very important relationship in my life. um, and that makes sense because we spend so much time at work. We spend so much time in our work teams that it's gonna, if we're handling ourselves and our relations properly, the fact that we would develop rapport and want to do effective things together and want to operate effectively together, that's actually pretty natural. Actually, even 50% of couples meet in the workplace, right? So it is the kind of prime use case of how healthy, functional, thriving, emotionally intelligent, or dysfunctional in all those areas we can become. Anyway, so that's just a snapshot of why this stuff actually applies to teams. You could drill a lot more into that, and also you could think about the difference between kind of a team that's starting and a kind of existing executing team, or a team that's going through some kind of transition. They would use a different range of those EQ competencies. But of course, EQ is the bread and butter of teams, and really that's just the flip side of saying, if it's very important for managers and leaders dealing with a team or leading a team, it's also going to be very important for everyone in that team, right? They're not unsubject to those same demands and experiences. Right, so hopefully you have a better understanding of how EQ actually does come into play in you and your teams and your work teams. I'm Robert Ogilvie, Team Leadership Coach. I'll talk to you guys soon.